This conference will now be recorded.
Well, thanks again for taking a little time this evening to join me. My name is Pam Schilling, and I appreciate everyone taking a little time away to have this discussion about networking during a tough economy in general, although certainly I'm going to speak a little bit more specifically about this unique environment of the COVID-19 health crisis. And our focus is going to be both internal and external networking, and I'll explain a little bit more about that in just one second. By way of introduction, for those of you that I may not have had a chance to get to know previously, my name is Pam Schilling again, and I'm the CEO of Archer Career. So we are a global career advisory firm and building technology focused on job search execution. I've been in the career space for formally about a decade, informally about 3 decades now. And what I really feel very proud of and excited about in my work is that I help people get hired and advance in their careers, particularly at some of the most highly selective companies in the world. And I and my team are very focused on that mission. This environment is very close to us. We work with people like all of you and feel the situation that you're in. And this topic of networking is one that I also very personally relate to because so much of my work comes from relationships. I learn insights about the marketplace because of my relationships and my networking. My revenue comes from relationships and business development that's done by way of networking and outreach. So this isn't something that I view theoretically. I view it very practically, and I hope to share some of those perspectives with you tonight. So with that, just a couple of other things by way of introduction. So this is the second webinar that we're doing on this topic. We're going to continue these webinars as long as it feels necessary. We do this typically as a part of our business, but just having these open discussions available and accessible to everyone. In a couple of weeks, we're going to have a session on interviewing. We're going to be joined by my colleague, Patty Hurley, who is a really insightful expert about research and pinpointing information about companies that can very much help with the kinds of things you need to do to align to a company's culture and their business needs. We're going to talk about that with a lens on hiring under pressure. And so for those that are both hiring managers as well as candidates, we think that that'll be a relevant conversation. A couple weeks later, we're going to talk a bit about resumes and again, what it really takes to fine tune a resume and allow your resume to stand out, especially when a candidate pool might be much larger than normal. And then a few weeks following that in June, we're going to talk even more about the overall job search and really how to stand out as a candidate, how to kind of thread a needle, especially when hiring might be very limited, and trying to apply some of these things that stand the test of time. So hopefully you all will join for some of those subsequent sessions. I'll always be recording and welcome the questions that I'm getting as well. I think that's a really key part of this to just help me understand the kinds of concerns that professionals have in the marketplace. The other thing I want to mention is that I'm also doing some coaching and contributing my time. I'm supporting a local business. I am a local small business. I believe the kind of circle that we live in and supporting our community is valuable. So I have some coaching sessions that are available. They have a very small fee attached to them if this is of interest, and 100% of my fee I am donating to a restaurant, and then they in turn are donating that to some local families that are struggling at this time. So I've had a really wonderful opportunity to meet some people through this, and again, we'll continue this probably throughout the summer. So thanks Probably the people I've met with may not be listening. If they are, wonderful, but if not, in general, I want to thank them as well for supporting that program. With that said, let me highlight a little bit about what I'm going to speak to tonight. And I have a couple of topics that I want to walk through. I'll take some questions throughout. I'll pause periodically, so please do put your questions in the chat. The main thing I'm going to kick us off with is this question of, is networking okay right now? And just talk about that, talk about it very pragmatically, not theoretically. I also want to share a little bit of my experience to help relate some of the things that I'm talking about and the experiences that I'm having in both asking for networking conversations as well as others asking me, and sort of in some ways sharing what I think in general the market might be feeling by way of some of my experiences. And then I want to lay out a few approaches as you're thinking about networking in your circumstance right now, how to approach this, how to target connections, how to build connections, how to think about the different kinds of individuals that you might be speaking to. And then the final topic that I want to address, and this came from some of the questions that you all submitted, but it's really this idea of, how do I get attention when I reach out to someone, especially right now? How do I then build rapport with someone? And then how do I take that to a stronger, deeper relationship and even building advocacy, whether it's a hiring manager, whether it's someone within my own company, whether it's someone I'm trying to do business with? So that's the flow of our conversation that I want to have. So let me address this main question, and quite a few people asked this, and I think it's fundamentally the right question to be wrestling with this point. You know, is this a time where I should be out networking, regardless of where you are in your career, what side of the table you might be on? Are you a job seeker? Are you a student? Are you a business person who relies on sales and business development? Are you a professional who just wants to continue to develop connections to create, greater professional connectivity and information? My answer is going to be very square. Absolutely, we should continue networking. I don't think I am the only one who is saying that. Everyone I am speaking to seems to have the same point of view. I see it being said on LinkedIn when I read through some of the comments by so many different professionals. Now, it may be true that at an individual level, there are certain people who don't feel like right now they have the capacity for networking. But I think on the whole, people recognize that this is a time when we do need to keep those professional connections going. I absolutely think there are some challenges as well that go along with this. There are pros and cons of this current environment that we're dealing with that I think enable and hinder networking. When I think about the challenges right now, and some of you may be experiencing this on a very personal level, I believe individuals, this is probably going to seem like the most obvious thing in the world, but individuals are under a great deal of stress. It's the work at home environment, it's trying to juggle many things, maybe uncertainty about job stability. I am a parent, I have my kids at home, and that is by no means the easiest thing to deal with. I do adore them, but they require a lot of attention and juggling many things. I think people are very distant from their loved ones and people that they're close to, and that creates some, stressors for a lot of different reasons. And I personally feel like in many ways, I have more work to do than ever before. On top of that, we have these really unusual work schedules. And, I can again say for myself, I tend to do some school related things with my kids in the morning. I try to do some work periodically in the afternoon, but I find that I'm doing a lot more work in the evening because that's when things are quieting down. And then my spouse, we kind of invert our schedules. it's really odd. That's not our normal routine. So people have shifted, and that may be causing challenges. I also recognize that many of us are spending a lot of time on webinars. So perhaps the last thing that we want to do is have another webinar or phone conversation with someone. And many people also might be asking, I'm not really sure that I can help. My company's not hiring, or I'm not necessarily in a position to be buying services. That may be a factor. And then I think there's some truth that, every time we enter a conversation, people are talking about the health crisis. I've had a lot of individuals just comment to me that I'm just exhausted from it. There's so much information. I'm not even reading the news or listening to the news anymore. And these all present challenges when it comes to networking. On the flip side, however, I do believe people want to help. I think more so than in some of our previous economic recessions, people remember the experience from our last recession, the financial crisis of 2008 and 2009. There's I think, a much greater interest in, reacting and helping than at that time. I think people were a bit shell-shocked then. I also think people have more time. I know personally, on a regular basis, I'm commuting an hour, sometimes two each day. I'm not having to do that anymore. I have a 3-minute commute to my coffee pot a couple times a day. I don't even have to go out and get Starbucks anymore because my local Starbucks is temporarily closed. So this is extending our time, and we don't have as many family commitments or personal commitments. This is, in some ways freeing for people. All those things that we never had a chance to do, now suddenly we're in a situation where we have capacity for it. There is also some truth that there are organizations that are growing right now that are in need of people. I know that I work with several clients in my coaching work who have had many interviews over the past 2 weeks. And if one interview doesn't progress, they're getting a call about another one. They happen to be targeting organizations that are in more essential businesses or have more remote opportunities. So being able to find those kinds of organizations can be very helpful. And I think the final dimension, and maybe some of you feel this as well, is that ability to connect with people. I think because we're not able, our interest, our psychology is so much greater. I know, as I've had some phone conversations and video conversations the past several weeks, there's just this genuine enthusiasm. It's almost hard at times to get people off the phone. I feel bad because we're, I think, just really craving that human interaction that we're not able to have because of our social distancing requirements. So this means be aware, obviously. That's the most important aspect, that it's not perfect, but there are a lot of circumstances that benefit us. If I go back to a larger point about the purpose of networking and some things to be keeping in mind, and perhaps addressing again some of the questions that you all are wrestling with. Networking is something that is an essential part of our careers, no matter what the current state of our career. We could be looking for a job, we could be in a job, and still there is value for networking. We could be doing business with other organizations and trying to cultivate new business. It could be that we're looking for some professional direction. There are questions that we're trying to understand about career changes that we want to make. One of the tools to be able to do that is networking. And I have found, I think, great benefit of always viewing networking as an opportunity to do research, both around career paths and jobs and organizations. What are the needs of companies? What are the challenges that they're facing? What are the opportunities that they have in their business and that they need certain individuals with certain skill sets. And so, because I think I view networking as this research dimension, I'm never hesitant to reach out to people. By no means am I perfect, but keeping that in mind, and addition to that, thinking about the idea of building a relationship. I know some of the questions that I received related to this concern that, especially as a job seeker right now, a networking outreach might seem very transactional. I'm reaching out to you because I'm looking for a job. I think that is one side of it, but the other side is if the organization is hiring and needs people, they want you to reach out. And the hiring manager wants to get to know people and to see that tenacity, that proactiveness. And it's an opportunity to be able to do that and set yourself apart. And this means that the networking that all of us can be doing, it is mutually beneficial. And I'm going to speak more to this because that's one of the key things that can always be a part of your mindset, is that even when you're asking for something, you have something to give. Many students, a lot of our college students, our graduate students, they're in positions right now where there might be networking going on for the job search. Some people have had internship opportunities or full-time positions that are not being able to be fulfilled because the organizations can no longer hire, so they have to restart. I think there's still an opportunity to create a mutually beneficial relationship with the people that you're reaching out to, because the other person has a chance to help. And that is something that, again, many people want to do. Um, and if I can, leave this topic with one, I guess, important takeaway, is to really forevermore think about networking as a habit, a routine. It should not be a water faucet that gets turned on and off. And if it's built into your regular routines, which is so hard to do, I know that, but if it's built into those routines, it just for the long run becomes so much beneficial. That means that this is a great time to begin to build that habit. All right. So if someone wouldn't mind putting your phone on mute, I would appreciate that. Thank you. So as I mentioned at the start, I personally am doing a lot of networking right now. And, I'm not a job seeker, but I do have to do business development. I do have to reach out to organizations for my work. I'm doing a lot of asking. I have a class that I'm teaching as an adjunct professor at DePaul. I invite panelists to my classes to talk about their kind of feet on the ground experiences. I have current clients, universities and companies that I work with, and trying to make sure that some of our programming is staying in place and how do we adapt it. I have universities that I might be working with in the fall that we haven't begun our work yet, and trying to make sure that we're still on target. I have potential clients that were in the proposal stage, new clients. I'm doing a lot of asking. I have individuals that I'm constantly seeking their expertise and input from to assist my clients and make connections as best I can. So, I would say that probably over the course of a week, I myself am doing outreach to people, 10, 15 people or more a week. I feel the challenge that we face, the hesitation, and trying to overcome that, I know can be difficult, but it is part of the way that we need to be to keep our fundamental business going, to keep our jobs as secure as we possibly can. Now, on the flip side, I am also in a position where I'm constantly being asked. I have people reach out to me for various things. I have former clients that informally want to talk about their situation and concerns. I have intern applicants. I have an internship open at my company right now, and I've had a few people reach out to try to have informational conversations. I have, individuals that have asked me to forward along a resume, and trying to put myself in the shoes of the individual reaching out and recognize my own behaviors, reactions. It is a challenging process to know and try to figure out how much activity that you can engage in and be helpful, but also, I personally, I think like many of us, can't be talking to people on the phone 8 hours every day. And, one of the things that I'm trying to think about, and I'll share with all of you in this conversation, is how do I react when I get that email in my inbox? And what is it that kind of triggers a response of, yes, I'd be happy to have a conversation, or that one email that maybe I don't happen to reply to because I just feel that for some reason I'm not going to engage in that conversation. I think it's something that we want to, try to understand both our behaviors and how we reach out to people, but also then how people might be responding and reacting. And those are some of the tips and the insights that I want to speak to in general, and then as well as from my own experience. So before I get into some of that and some of the techniques, I want to organize our networking just a little bit and think about it in terms of closeness of relationships and maybe different ways that we can handle the different types of relationships and the different needs that we may have given our career position. And so I've thought about it in terms of this inside out framework, and the way that I even treat some of my own networking, and especially in about the last month, I've thought a lot more about this. So I think about the closest connections to me, and who are those individuals, and how might I do outreach to them, and with what frequency and with what tone and purpose, all of that. And when I think about the closest connections, for those of us that are working, it could be our immediate boss. For me, I don't particularly have a boss. It's kind of myself, but it could be the stakeholders, the advisors to my company. It could be my clients, those type of individuals. I also think about my peers and the people that I work with on my team, and then obviously my family and friends, who are not necessarily professional connections, but the truth is I'm probably going to prioritize some of that. And ultimately, those individuals have business as well. I have a cousin who happens to be a federal judge. She and I were exchanging, I was kind of joking with her about how, court could be happening in this environment, and, how is she dealing with all of that? So we're not having a per se a business conversation, but in terms of my priorities, I'm probably thinking about those closest connections first. And I'm going to come back and talk about managers in just a second. The second group then, that's a little bit further out, but is also a tight part of our community, I would call those rapid responders. I think about the people in my world that when I send an email, I hear from them the same day. If I send a text message, I hear from them in several hours. It's not invasive. Why is this important? Because if I'm going to go to people and I'm going to ask for help, if I'm going to ask for other connections, I'm probably going to go to that group first, because those are people that we already have trust built, we already have care built, we want to support each other, and we have this already kind of give and take relationship. Then there's another group of people beyond that that I call the it's been too long people. And you all may relate to this. It's the email that you send to someone and it starts with, oh my gosh, it's been way too long since we've had a chance to speak. And I know when I get an email like that, I'm actually really excited. And the last few weeks, I've had several of those emails. I've also sent a bunch of those emails. Why is that important? Because those are people that, given the current environment, we may not know how they could be helpful. We may be able to, because we've already got that trust in that relationship, find that they do have a way of helping. I was actually on a webinar with a colleague of mine, just like this, who I haven't probably talked with in 3 years. This individual moved from the US back to his home country in Sweden. And that was kind of how we started the conversation. Oh my gosh, it's been so long. What have you been up to? And in the last half hour of the conversation, we talked a bit about how his expertise could help one of my clients. And so I was making an ask because he's operating in an international market that I'm not on the ground. And eventually he said, I'd be happy to speak. I'd be happy to help. If I can make a referral, I'm happy to do this, right? That wasn't exactly what I was expecting with our catch-up conversation. So sometimes those type of networking conversations can lend themselves to some really exciting surprises. Now, the final group, the outer ring, if you will, for some of you, I know is a critical question. These new connections, people that you don't know yet, they could be in organizations that you're targeting for employment opportunities, and trying to reach out to those individuals. The truth is, it's hard. There's absolutely no way around it. I personally reach out to people cold with frequency. Maybe there's an organization that I feel like I could offer some services to. There's people that I'm told that, hey, this would be a good person, or maybe I read about somebody or see a speaker, and we have to reach out cold. That's very hard. It's definitely difficult to kind of get that connection without a referral. I'm going to talk a little bit about some techniques in a moment, but for many of us, we have to build those new connections, especially with organizations that are hiring that we just don't happen to have people that are closer to us, people in those inner three rings. If you don't have anyone there, we have to reach out. So thinking about that, there's some general levers that I think we can apply no matter who we're networking with. Some of it is, right now, especially, be honest and be direct in your communication. I have found that that does not fail me. I've always been direct in asking people for what it is that I would like from them when I'm asking for their time, and being as specific as possible. Sometimes people are very uncomfortable to send notes to say, I'm looking at a new opportunity, you have a position posted. I also think that right now, this is just the right thing to do because it's the reality of the circumstance that we're in. And I do think people appreciate that directness. Now, there's a way that we can put that in a wrapper, and I'll again talk a little bit more about that technique shortly. But the truth, the honest, the direct, all of that can be super valuable. And then what we also may have to do in kind of thinking about this world of our connections is to be aware that this is both short term and long run. Some people may not have an immediate opportunity if you're a job seeker. Some people may not want to immediately engage in business. But the more that you can learn, the more that they can understand about who you are and what you offer, there might be something down the road. And that's just, a little bit of an investment. And of course, we have to balance our pressing needs versus our longer term needs. When it comes down to networking, I think there are three things that really stick out with approaching individuals. So one is doing the right kind of research. So even if I'm reaching out to a new connection, somebody that I don't know, you can do your homework and you can look at someone's LinkedIn profile. If it's someone of significance, going into Google, sometimes clicking forward a couple of pages. It is amazing how much valuable information is there. And if you really scroll and go a layer deeper to learn about the person and to try to find some information that maybe everybody else hasn't quite picked up on. And I think also in general, when people are doing networking outreach, spending 15 minutes doing research is not commonly done. That may seem strange, but I also think it's the case. The second thing when reaching out to people is really putting yourself in their shoes. I know that you're busy, you may be juggling quite a few things. I hope you're faring well in this present environment. And, trying to present that you want to have a conversation to learn about their team, learn about the organization, learn about the company, and try to figure out where they're facing challenges right now that you might be able to help with, particularly if you're a job seeker. Same for those that are students, and trying to understand where organizations really have needs, particularly for junior individuals, and what could you do, where they need help, what are some of the characteristics, how could you come in and help tackle some of the challenges right now? What might be the best way to do that? Asking about and learning about the other side's needs is super valuable. For business owners, it's the same thing. We all have products and services. We're trying to continue our business and to create streams and sources of revenue. How are you helping your clients, your customers? And there might right now be some changes and different things that need to happen. And can you adapt your business? The best way to do that is by getting feedback, learning about the challenges, learning about the struggles. And I think also one of the things about focusing on the needs of others is that you might be able to pick up on something and in a conversation hear something and then share information back, share an insight, share an article, share a suggestion. That's one of the ways that we create this mutually beneficial conversation. The final thing I would say about an important lever in the environment of networking is thinking about the tone of the written communication, because this is clearly the world that we're operating in. We're sending emails, we might be sending messages through LinkedIn, and short and sweet and to the point, and making your ask clear, but doing it with a little bit of warmth in the wrapper of that message. And the writing skills I hear from so many are important in the business context. The way that we say things, the way that we phrase things can make a big difference, especially if you're reaching out to a connection that you don't know. Now, I am not saying that one should spend hours trying to draft an email communication. That is not productive. But applying a few principles of, hello, I hope you're well, I hope you're navigating through this circumstance. I'm reaching out to you for this reason. I found your information here and it really caught my attention because, and I'm wondering if you might have 15, 20, 30 minutes to have a conversation about this. And the idea is to be concise, to be clear, and also to start small. Rather than asking for an hour of someone's time, asking for a half hour, and using that note to build rapport in writing. We can definitely do that. And I'm gonna speak again just a little bit more about that when I talk about some further insights. So thinking again about this this framework of kind of the inside out, I want to speak to some specific individuals in your worlds that could be high priority individuals to be networking with. So for anyone who's presently working, whether it's a full-time position, if you're a student, a part-time position, if you're a contractor, temporary employee, especially in this remote environment, I think this is crucial. And the individual that I want to focus on is your boss, and how important it is to think about that individual and how you're communicating. And I know, I have a spouse who's working remotely, how he's dealing with the communication with the individual that he reports to, and trying to think about all of the managers right now that we work with who are also dealing with the same personal stresses, who now have a remote team that they've probably not experienced before unless you are a part of a company that had done more remote work on a typical basis. There's just many questions that are going on in people's minds. And one of the things I think I learned many years ago from some of the partners I worked for at my first consulting job at Diamond Management Technology Partners was to always keep people in the loop, to be the proactive communicator. And when I was at Diamond, I mean, that was just something that I got such great advice from those individuals because I got a chance to work very early in my career with our partners because I was part of an acquisition that our firm was working on, and just constantly keeping their needs in mind and making sure that they have the information, that they're not wondering how things are occurring, that they're maybe a little bit uncertain and feeling a little out of kilter. And it doesn't hurt to have that conversation and reach out. And I think by the same token, you may have some career needs. Perhaps you were up for a promotion, perhaps you were trying to think about moving to a different department, and it can feel a little bit daunting because maybe that conversation is on hold. But perhaps your manager might enjoy a 15-minute conversation at some point to just think about some things that are a little bit more long term. And it doesn't hurt to ask. Trying to find other ways to not be so weighed down by the present circumstances. Now, you have to read the room in that environment. But I think it's one of these things that sometimes we don't engage our managers enough in being advocates for us in our careers. And so taking that bull by the horns can be a really valuable thing. But I think, the bottom line is trying to be proactive in your communication, asking for other ways that potentially you could help without overworking yourself. You don't want to kind of, tip the ship over, so to speak. And just thinking about the opportunity right now to create a lot of trust. And that trust, I think, has a lot of benefits in the long term. By the same token, think about the team and the business partners that you're working with. It's nice, I think, when people can check in and reach out and confirming priorities and confirming approaches to communication, and for a bit of time letting go of some of the things or dealing with some of the mini frustrations before they get out of control. So there's kind of a balance there, but that's kind of a networking conversation. You could be working on a cross-functional team and perhaps you're looking to move into a different functional area. Having a conversation with someone in that area right now that is trying to understand the challenges that they're facing, that's valuable information for you when you potentially want to try to move into that area. What are the challenges? What's the business trying to accomplish? What are they struggling with? Where are some of the gaps in the team? Because if you're going to think about heading in that direction, it's valuable to know those things so that you can prepare for it now. That can come about through a networking conversation or just a conversation with a member of your team. This is where internal networking for those that are currently employed can be so valuable. Another particular group would be business owners who have clients, consultants who have clients, people in sales who have clients. I think one of the things that I have tried, I'm not sure I've always done it perfectly, but I have tried to keep this in mind, is to not always think about my client conversations with a transaction in mind. There are times when we just need to get on the phone and we need to talk to each other as humans, as business people. And that investment in the relationship will pay off. Now, again, it might not help in the short term, but you never know. I've had a couple of conversations with people that maybe it's just a 1 hour coaching appointment, a session that's paid. It's very small. And then after that, they've said, I might like to do something greater. And that's exciting. So I think I've found that sometimes just taking a little bit of time and investing the ROI on that, the business opportunity can be quite extensive, and potentially it could be in the short term. It could also, be an investment in the future. So thinking about that, and it doesn't hurt as well to consider people's financial status. If we have clients, if we have customers, there can be some challenges right now with cash flow. Are people okay? Do they need terms adjusted? I have done this with some of my clients who, have a lesser capacity to pay. Maybe they're furloughed. Um, I don't love doing it. I do it with great care, but trying to be creative in that regard, again, is mutually beneficial. By no means do I want to give away the business, and I don't want to have bad debt in my business, but I'm also trying to think about things that build that relationship, build trust, and also have a long-term contribution. And what, many times, and I can just again speak about some of my work, I have much larger engagements I do. At this point in time, if there's a need, I would do something much smaller than I normally would, because I value the chance to work together, and I also feel a sense of commitment. Now, all businesses are not in that position, so that's something you have to think a little bit about individually. But if you're kind of in that customer-facing sales role, consider those types of things. And, for anybody else who's job searching, the simplest thing I can say is just do it. The payback right now of networking is tremendous. People are hesitant. Many people are concerned about being a burden, trying to ask for a favor. And again, I think so many people that I'm speaking to and hearing from are just saying, yes, bring it on. And if I can't do it, I just won't respond. And it's nothing personal. So just do it and be very specific. Be persistent. If you don't hear from someone right away, reach back out. I have a networking email that I sent about 4 or 5 days ago. I haven't heard from that person, and I have it in my reminder list to reach out to them, maybe the latter part of this week, maybe early next week. That's just the way that it works. And if you do your research and you put some of that information into your email, that will be great. Now, when you get in the conversation and have the networking, that's the next step. All right. So before I move into some of those techniques about kind of getting attention, building rapport, building advocacy, I want to take a pause and maybe address any questions or comments that people have. So if there's anything that from, what I've been talking about or questions that are coming to your mind at this point, please put them in the chat and I can take a couple of minutes to address those before I speak to some more tactical things. Any pressing questions? Or I would also value if anyone has had an experience that maybe was a positive experience, a negative experience with networking, something that you're not sure about that helps illuminate some of this topic of networking. Excellent. I've got some good questions, so let me take a look at these. So one of the questions I think that I'm interested in commenting about, is Zane, I think, asking about, targeting a role that maybe you're overqualified for. And so if I put that in context, there might be a position posted at a company. You want to reach out to the hiring manager, perhaps it's you're at a certain level, perhaps it's a little bit more junior for your skill set, but maybe you're not employed right now, maybe you've been furloughed, and so having that position could be great. Here's where I think putting yourself in the mindset of the hiring manager as you approach that networking can be crucial. Number one, if I'm a hiring manager, I would wonder if you are a flight risk once the economy picks up. So my antenna goes off when someone overqualified applies to my position. I might be appreciative that you want to be working, that you want to work in our organization, but I don't want to have to rehire someone in a year when now the economy is picked back up, or 18 months, and you've realized that now the market's a bit better and you can go out and get a better job, higher paying, better level. So I think naturally you have to be aware that if you are overqualified for the position that you're applying to, there's going to be great skepticism. But here's the flip side of that. In your outreach and your networking, if you have a clear view of why that opportunity is a good fit for you and how you can contribute to the organization and how you anticipate potentially that you could stay within that organization and grow into other roles, other responsibilities, now we're in business. And that can absolutely be conveyed through the networking process. And I can tell you guys, I have a client that I was helping prepare for an interview, and this person had applied for a job that they were definitely overqualified for. But they were going from a small business to a much larger business. The much larger business would have many years of future opportunities. And so as we were preparing for that interview, I was being that kind of hard ass hiring manager. Why would you take this job? It seems like you're stepping back in your career. What are your salary expectations? Wow, that's a bit on the high side for the budget for this position. Your best bet then is to have done the research and done your homework before you go into that networking conversation. And then if you go further, if you're going to apply for the position and you're going to interview for the position, making sure that you set up this longer range view, because unless it's a temporary position, as a hiring manager, I don't want to bring you in and have you leave in a year or two. All right. So hopefully that kind of helps when you're thinking about being overqualified. And then the final thing I would say is, as a hiring manager, especially in the environment right now, it is valuable when I have somebody who maybe has a skill set that's tested, that I don't have to train as much, and who could potentially do some other things beyond the scope of the role. But you have to be sure that you can nail that job. My husband was telling me at his company, they interviewed someone for a position, and that person was very much overqualified, but could have done a wonderful job for that role, and potentially grown. The unfortunate side was when that person came in to do their interview, they were interviewing for some other job, and everything they kept talking about was not the scope of the role that they had been brought in for. And so unfortunately, that person wasn't hired. So keep the conversation very much focused on how you can deliver value given that role. Excellent question. Thank you. There is another question about platforms other than LinkedIn. Also an excellent question. So it depends a little bit on where you are and what your affiliations are. So let me give a few other suggestions. If you have attended an academic institution, many universities have databases for their alumni, and in those databases, they have connections, they have alumni information. That is certainly one source, and they also have job posting systems many times for alumni. And in those job postings, sometimes you can find companies, sometimes they have contacts. The other arena that I'll sort of stay in the university environment, many universities have alumni clubs. And for example, I'm based here in Chicago. Beautiful day. There were snowflakes coming down, which I thought was super bizarre because it was sunny all day, but it was kind of an interesting thing to see out the window. In any case, I know that there's a whole set of universities in Chicago, and they have alumni clubs, and they have names of the leaders of those alumni clubs. And they also have startup incubators. Almost every university has those these days. There are webinars. If I think about our current environment, normally I would say they're having events, but they're having webinars, and they have speakers and panelists. So look into the universities and some of those things, depending on your field, if you're someone in marketing, if you're someone in HR, if you're in sales, all of that kind of professional activity, sciences, it goes on within the academic arena. An additional resource I would use are relevant, publications and journals, and things that are published that have practitioners or business people. If you read the Wall Street Journal, or you read Fast Company magazine, there are people that are highlighted or profiled. There are people that contribute to articles. If you look at Harvard Business Review, there are people that look, and sometimes those are great connections to be able to find. So in terms of a platform, that's not kind of a one size, one place, where everything is smushed together, but some of those other platforms can be extremely valuable. And whatever your domain is, there are also professional organizations. So, the marketing professionals, there's the American Marketing Association, and for people that are in accounting, the CPA societies, and people that are engineers, there's a number of different professional engineering associations. So go to your domains and find some of those resources, because many of them also have career support, and those are some fantastic places. So hopefully that helps in that regard as well. Oh, and another individual's commented, of course, I did not mention Facebook, but yeah, there are a lot of Facebook groups and professional groups. So I think that that's another potential. Many of the social media platforms have uh, have that, and Glassdoor has some information. So use some of the other kind of, I guess, large scale social media platforms. Look at the businesses, and then you can find some of their Facebook groups online. Hopefully, some of those suggestions help. Um, there's another question that I think is good to address at this point. Could I share some thoughts about how reaching out could be mutually beneficial? So a few thoughts on that. I think that you want to understand your purpose for reaching out. If you're a job seeker, you typically have, I would say, three potential purposes when you reach out to someone. Purpose number one is very high level. I saw an article about your company. I would love to get more of a firsthand discussion about where your business focus is. What are some of the challenges you're facing right now? Where are some of the hiring needs? This presumes that the organization is hiring. That's a very high level, what I would traditionally call an informational interview. So that can be one purpose. Why is that beneficial to the other person? I can think of a couple of reasons. One, all of us have jobs to do, and we like to know how we're perceived in the marketplace. We like to hear a little bit about why you're interested in our company. If I'm an HR professional and my job is recruiting, I want to think about what kind of information is bringing candidates to our company. So you're actually, by reaching out and having that conversation, you're giving me insights about my impact, my efficacy of some of our recruiting strategies. All right. I also may have a hiring need that I haven't posted yet. And your conversation is maybe helping me to think about the type of candidates that we should be looking at. I may have a hiring manager who's looking for somebody, and I can, put your name in my tickler file, right? So all of those are legitimate business reasons why your outreach for even an informational conversation can be mutually beneficial. Now, how to take it a step further is, maybe we're having a conversation and I start talking about one of my challenges, and, I say to you, well, if you were a part of our team, how would you tackle it? And you share an idea. And that gets me unstuck, or that gives me some insight that I didn't previously have. That's super valuable. Maybe I'm trying to do some, new product development, and I have this idea, and I just want to run it by you because you, decided that we're an interesting company. So you never know how people might value. And if I take it then a little bit more altruistic, I think it's mutually beneficial because people helped me. Therefore, I get a great deal of satisfaction out of helping you. I mean, it's the pay it forward concept. Okay. So if you go even closer, you have so I mentioned there's three purposes for networking if you're a job seeker. One is that informational interview. The second might be exploratory. I may have a role on my team, and you're, potentially a good fit. And maybe there's something particular about that role that's emerged. It's not in the job description. There's only so much information, and I can talk with you about that. I can tell you what one of my priorities is. I can give you some context, right? And that's just helpful because I'm hiring and I want my hiring process. I only get a chance sometimes to hire one person, and I want it to be the best candidate possible. And so it's mutually beneficial because if I'm looking for someone, or maybe I'm thinking about crafting a job posting, I get a chance to know what it is that I'm looking for, and I get a chance to learn more about you. And if you're a good candidate, maybe my role isn't the right role, but maybe I have a colleague. So all of those things are valuable. And if you take it a step further, maybe we have that conversation, and after the fact, you think about it and you send me an article that you read that reflected, one of the questions that I was wrestling with. And so you've shared something with me. All right. All of this creates that mutually beneficial relationship. To an extent, I travel a little bit with my job. When I'm talking to people and I find that we're crossing paths geographically, I ask people for travel recommendations. What part of the city should I stay in? Um, maybe restaurants should I go to? Are there activities that I should do there? You know, you've reached out to me, but in that conversation, I learned something about you, and that may trigger something that's helpful to me. Or it might give me a heads up. Maybe I'm approaching a business and you have some experience with them, and not that you're going to share secrets, but maybe you share something that helps me understand their culture a little bit better. So all those things go into this networking environment. And when you think about this idea of mutually beneficial, we're in an information age. And so this exchange of information is tremendously valuable. And I can tell you guys, an experience that I'm having. I'm working with some undergraduate students right now. I work with them a lot. I'm really lucky. I do some adjunct teaching, and so I get that exchange. And then I'm working with a startup pro bono consulting group at the University of Illinois. I absolutely love the exchange I'm having with all of these students because I'm creating a product that they are one of my target markets, and they tell me all kinds of things. They talk to me about social media. I'm learning about the technology platforms. I, learn some of the behaviors. I learn some of the challenges that they face. I learn the way that they manage their time and the tools that they use. So I say all of that because there's a fairly significant, if you will, experience differential between myself and a college student. But yet, when I have those conversations, the exchange is mutual. So no matter who we are, I think we can have that same mutuality. For all of you, the key to creating that mutual exchange, I think there's two keys. One is really being good at, researching things and doing a little homework before you talk to people. And secondly, when you're talking to people, listening. I was having a conversation with a business colleague today, a woman that I've met who has some services that I would potentially be interested in. And somewhere in the conversation, she made this statement about how she approaches her work. And she said this phrase. She said, I have to see it because I'm from the show me state. and I don't know if that means anything to any of you. It meant a lot to me because I too am from the Show Me State, and the Show Me State is Missouri. That's, the tagline of Missouri. And so when she said that, and I've known this woman for 2 months, instantly I think our relationship changed because I asked her about it. Like, wait a minute, did you just say you're from the Show Me State? She's like, yes. And I said, where did you grow up? And, she told me she's from someplace south of St. Louis and I'm from Kansas City. And we had a whole conversation, and it just created a really different dynamic. And this is someone I've known for 2 months. Now, it's a shame on me that I didn't figure that out sooner, but the point is really figuring out those kinds of things, because what we know about people who have mutually beneficial relationships is that we found some common ground. We found some information. And if you all are looking at this time and you have things to do and you're, maybe a little bit bored binge watching Netflix, one of the classes I took when I did my MBA was in power and influence, and we studied a couple of leaders in this arena. One of them is a gentleman named Robert Cialdini, and he's written a lot about influence, and particularly influence at work. And I think he could have some further information if you want to explore this territory of being mutually beneficial, building rapport, creating advocates. One of the quotes that I found on his website says, "We like people who are similar to us. We like people who pay us compliments. We like people who cooperate with us towards mutual goals." And he has some techniques about how to do this. So it's Cialdini, Cialdini, no H. And perhaps look that up, and that could be of interest. Thanks for those questions. So a couple more things that I'm going to comment on, and then I'll spend a few more minutes with our last maybe 10 minutes or maybe about 10 minutes or so with other questions that you all may have. So how do you get attention? How do you build rapport? And how do you build advocacy? You're going to execute in networking, whatever your purpose is. I'm going to give you guys a little bit of a case study. And this is, from me as the hiring manager. I am getting lots of outreach from individuals because I have an internship opportunity in my company. And I have 2 emails that are sitting on the screen. One of them is a little bit longer than the other. One of them addresses me as Dr. Schilling, and one of them addresses me as Dr. Pam. This is something that I think is important, right? So the US, we tend to, with people that have titles, we tend to use their last name if we're going to use doctor. Now, most of the time, nobody calls me Dr. Schilling. I've tried to get my kids to call me Dr. Mom, but it hasn't worked. I'm still working on it. I'll let you all know later. But I appreciate that because there is some recognition there. My cousin, who's the federal judge, when I send a card to her house, I write out the honorable blah, 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 blah. But for the most part, I can, my point here is I can tell somebody who's kind of thought this through, because for the most part, we don't use doctor or Mr. or Ms. or Reverend in formal communication with a first name, unless it's kind of somebody that goes by that, like Dr. Oz, if you guys ever see those personalities on TV, or Dr. Phil or Judge Judy. Those are personalities, but it isn't the way that we write. So to be honest, I kind of filter when I see that greeting. That may seem really picky, but it's just a tone. Now, I would also be fine if somebody sent me an email that said, hi, Pam. That would be fine too. The other thing is there's kind of a warmth, a rapport building. I hope you're staying well. One of the statements that I think is really interesting in comparison is offering prior experience that could be relevant to the job that's based on work experience versus just school experience, because this is a graduate level student. Now, some of you are students, so that's going to be fine. But, when I have to compare two things, I have to have ways to compare. And quite honestly, our internship is probably better suited for someone with a little bit of work experience. But the real kicker that was highlighted for me in our internship posting, it actually says it's really difficult to do informational conversations because our team is incredibly busy working on a project. You can do research on our website, but it'll be hard to have an informational conversation. I actually say that in the job posting, and there's a reason for it, and it's a process that we're using. The one person on the left who sent me this note, in her note, she acknowledges having read that information. I would normally reach out for an informational interview, but I want to respect you and your team's time, in parentheses, as mentioned on your website. So that was actually the phrase that caught my attention, because it tells me that she read, because this is the last paragraph of a very long job posting. And so if I have a choice and I only have a limited amount of time, one email has this specific thing that shows me a little extra work was done. The other email is also really good, don't get me wrong, but it sort of ignores the fact that we noted that informational conversations might be difficult. Okay, so what is the lesson of this? The lesson is that I am super picky. But at a more macro level, sometimes it's small things that matter. And if you've done your homework and you can show me that you've done your homework, there's a decision at times that I'm having to make with my limited time. What's yes, what's no, in terms of who I might speak to. So think about that. The second thing to think about is your purpose. When you are trying to get my attention, what exactly is your ask, and phrasing that very specifically, and then writing this into your email, keeping it short. Both of these messages were sent through LinkedIn. They could have been sent through our website. They also could have been sent direct to my email because it's not that hard to find. And I think that the idea of having a little bit of warmth, you want to read the room. I'm a career coach, I'm in the business, I'm a people business, I'm a consultant, kind of knowing a little bit of that can be helpful. I think the other thing that, this person did that was kind of interesting was talking about the team, and that's something that I found very cool because we are a small team, and versus, just me. So these little subtle things, I don't have a silver bullet to share with you, but I think trying to find a way to very briefly create warmth in your notes, having a clear purpose, showing very directly, especially if you're a job seeker, how you could feel the team out and the business out, and then plug in a need can be helpful. And then, the last thing I would just say is be smart. Find pieces of information that give you guideposts. I know that when I talk to my colleagues who are in hiring positions, who are in HR, it is obvious that people have not done their homework. And if you can just do a half an hour of, reading a website, reading if it's a public company, very quickly reading their 10K, trying to find one person to talk about the business, that makes a big difference. And so if you can do that by way of networking, all the better. The rapport is not easy. It's art and science. There's some techniques about, building that common ground, complimenting people without being disingenuous, finding ways to help. We talked about that a little bit. And then this last area of, how do you go to a state of advocacy? It's hard. It's definitely hard. But I think one of the ways that really stands out is just your performance. When I have a networking conversation with someone, and I think others may find this as well, it's great when I can see that you have an agenda. You have thought about the things that you want to talk about. Because remember, you reached out to me. And so when I ask, what questions do you have? Or are there other things that I could tell you? Having a lot of questions, and also saying, I was reading about such and such, and I'm curious what your take on that is, or what are, it sounds like you're bringing a new product to market. Are you, facing any challenges doing that right now? Those are the kinds of things that help me to build that relationship with you and to, create that advocacy on my part. Because what I'm hearing from you is that you want to come into my business and help me solve our problems, right? And then if I'm a good organization and I'm a good leader, I'm going to ask you what you're looking for and what's important in your career and what you value and what advancement you're trying to have. But I think the best way to build rapport and to build advocacy is to do your homework, have a really top-notch conversation where you are prepared, and to know the kinds of things that you potentially could do to help our business. And then have some storytelling. I mean, I've told you all a few stories tonight. Maybe they're funny, maybe they're not, maybe they're interesting, maybe they're not, but we are better communicators by way of making experiences very realistic and very tangible. All right. And then, that art of listening. I mentioned I was having this conversation with this colleague of mine who's from the Show Me State. And she summarized at the end of our conversation the three most important things that I was looking for from her as a service provider. And I have to say, I was really impressed with that, because we had a good 45-minute conversation and we talked about a lot of things, but she was able to kind of synthesize that down. Now, turn that around to you as a job seeker. If I've told you all about this opportunity, if I told you about our business, if you're ending the conversation and you say to me, I want to summarize a couple of things that you've said. It sounds like you've got this pressing business priority. It sounds like your need on the team is this. And that also from like a culture and environment fit, it's really important to have this. And, I think that those are all things that I could bring, and I'd be really excited to talk further and see if there might be an opportunity here for me to help you address some of those issues. right? If you can do that kind of synthesis, which I know is not easy, but it really makes a standout difference. Whether you're networking with a customer, whether you're networking with a connection, whether you're networking with an investor, a business partner, really thinking about the other person's needs and being able to kind of break that down, I think goes a long, long way. Excellent. I'm going to spend a couple of minutes with a few more questions that you might have. I'll take the one that's presented right now, and if you guys have other questions, please put them in the chat. And I'll also maybe spend a few minutes if anybody wants to ask a question live. So, attaching a resume in a cold email. I'm going to give you all my opinion on this, and I welcome other commentary if other people have had experiences. I do not like attaching resumes to a networking email, the first email. I feel that it is a bit forward and aggressive. And, for some reason, it just feels weird. I do, however, like a couple of things. So one, I like having your resume replicated in your LinkedIn profile, and I'm not a stockholder in Microsoft. It's the best tool we have right now. And then having your LinkedIn profile, the URL in your email and making it, front and center. If you would like to learn more about my background, here is the link to my profile on LinkedIn. It is a resume, but it gives me a little bit of control over the conversation. Now, many individuals, when you email them, if they are open to having a conversation with you, they will ask you to send them their resume. And the other thing that I think works really well is if you've reached out to someone and they say, hey, yes, let's have a conversation, let's do it next Thursday, then you could say to them, fantastic, I really appreciate it. In preparation for our conversation, I'm sending my resume so that you might be able to get a sense of my background. Okay. There are different people that have different takes on that. I feel like that process is a little bit more of the normative protocol. But the truth is that anybody that you reach out to, if they really want to talk to you, they're probably going to look at your background on LinkedIn. And that's okay, and you should do that as well. There is no such thing as LinkedIn stalking unless you're a bit overly aggressive about it. All right, same with Facebook. Other questions, and even if you have a question you want to ask live, please take yourself off mute, and I'm happy to address it. If we could try to stay within the context of the networking conversation, I would appreciate that, just to stay on topic. All right. Is there anything that, from a networking standpoint, just in our last couple of minutes, that would be tactically valuable for people? I have a couple of thoughts of a couple things I want to suggest, but just to solicit a little bit more input. All right. So my couple of last, tactical points about networking. So back to just do it. Be thoughtful of the timing. Evenings are kind of nice because people are settling in. Sometimes, a Saturday morning, a Sunday morning is kind of nice. I think Monday morning is a little bit too much. Again, people are trying to get started for the week. So kind of think a little bit about the timing. Short is better, but clear. making it very clear what you are asking for. And in that same spirit, do ask for something and be clear with that. I mean, I cannot express how many people I am asking for things right now. You know, my colleague Shane, hey Shane, can you get on the phone? I'd love to pick your brain about expertise into selling in universities. I'd love to just get a couple of ideas from you. Hey, when I'd love to pick your brain about marketing in this area, you know, et cetera, individual after individual. Could you help do some, software testing for us? I put this into emails very clearly. By the same token, don't be offended when, number one, people say no. I had somebody who agreed to help us in our software development, do some beta testing, and then they came back to me and said no, they couldn't. I tried to encourage them to continue to help, but I'm not offended that they had to drop out. It's not, it's just timing. Don't be offended if people don't reply, because again, I'm probably, if I'm going to say no, I do it by way of no response versus saying no. And it doesn't mean that in 3-4 weeks I wouldn't reply. So follow up, and don't translate any of those no's to anything about you. I know in my coaching work, I spend a lot of time with my clients and even just with my colleagues and my friends and the people that I know in my business relationships. We just sometimes get in our own heads and we make assumptions about the party on the other side. Maybe I don't have the right credentials, maybe I don't have the right background, maybe they didn't like my email, maybe it was too abrasive. It isn't any of that stuff. Just keep going and being persistent, and that will go a long way. Most of us are not in sales for good reason. We don't like rejection. And any type of outreach, any type of networking, any type of job search is full of rejection. And I personally have to remind myself, because I get this feeling at times too, that I'm not being rejected. What it is either the person on the other side didn't feel that this was compelling, it's not a priority right now, they're busy, and there are other places to go. So keep that in mind and don't get frustrated. I love watching sports. I wish baseball was happening because it would be really fun to be outside doing that, but it'll come soon. But I always think that, the individual who wins the major league batting title bats like 330, which means, out of 1,000 at bats, they get 300 hits. So think about that. And that is the top person in the league. And so have that expectation in mind. And thank you, Jamar, for complimenting the Royals. I appreciate that. Go Chiefs, and sad for the Kansas Jayhawks that we didn't get an NCAA tournament, but it's okay. Maybe next year. We'll see. Fantastic, everyone. So I want to thank you all again for joining. I hope you found this useful and interesting. Again, in a couple of weeks, we're going to have a conversation about interviewing and, again, to try to tackle some of the challenges in a, more, scarce hiring environment. And I wish all of you well, both in your health and your business, and be well. Good luck. Good night, everybody.